Okay, we are going to do a final segment, final part. We've had a lot of technical difficulties because we don't know what we're doing here. We don't do this regularly. And we lost the end of what we already did. So we're going to we reviewed everything, and we're going to kind of final thoughts and a couple more things that we wanted to add. And so I'm going to go right into where I was trying to shift things to. And the final thing that I need to talk about, and really to cap up what I was trying to get across here, is that think of a magician. A magician needs to control the entire narrative of his audience, and the bigger the audience, the more he needs to control the narrative. He needs to direct people to look where he wants you to look, because he needs to make sure you don't see what he doesn't want you to see. And that is exactly what, well, by the way, I need to say this. I actually am aware that we are in the month of January. Having reviewed everything, I know that I said December 6th a lot. It was January 6th, for the record. I was not in a time warp. I'm just losing my mind. Getting back to this. They need to control the narrative because they need to distract you from what they are actually doing. And part of controlling the narrative is to be the first one to give it. Okay? Manipulation 101, you have to be the first one to tell the lie so that the person coming along to tell the truth looks dishonest. And that is what they needed to do. So they created the environment for chaos so they could tell the narrative of chaos. So Biden's speech, which was pre-prepared about the breach of the Capitol, would look true, okay? And no one would look at the things they did to set it up, to set up the crowd, so they could create the narrative that Trump instigated an insurrection. All right? And I just want to remind you that if Trump instigated an insurrection of 200 unarmed people trying to overthrow the government, it is the worst, stupidest thing ever. And clearly, Trump did not try to do that. Okay? He would have made sure they were armed with grenades or something. I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. But let's go on to what I want to talk about, Harris. Okay? Vice President-elect Harris. She made a response to the chaos as well. And she made a different response. She wants a different narrative. Or maybe she's trying to cover a different aspect they don't want you to look at. Or they want you to, they know you're going to see it. Okay? They know that everyone's going to see that there were no police presence. And so they have to give the narrative before people start thinking about it themselves. Okay? They need to say, this is what we want you to see, and this is what it means, so that you don't start thinking, hey, what does that mean, and asking questions. They don't want you to ask questions. They've already answered it. You don't need to ask, shut up, go away. Okay? So Harris comes out and makes a response. And what she says, because she wants to spin the narrative that the United States is a racist place where people of color have no chance and are treated differently. So her spin, and she said it, and watch her speech, she said that the justice in this country treats black people different. If black people were trying to enter the Capitol, they would have been blocked by a military armed force. But she said they allowed the white supremacists to enter the Capitol. Now,
well, and I just think the word white supremacist is pretty harsh. I mean, I don't know if she directly called us all white supremacists, but I think she was showing or implying that because there was some sort of thing like white privilege.
Yeah, white privilege.
White people can go and protest and police don't have to show up or something.
Let me just ask a question. What is the difference between white privilege and white supremacy?
Well, I think that when you say white supremacy, you're saying that the person believes that they are privileged and superior. But so when you're talking about white privilege, right, it's another person saying that person has privilege because of their skin color.
Right, and I think they're the same thing, but they're trying to change the word because they want to control the narrative, right? It's white supremacy sounds like, oh, you're conspiracy theorists about white people. But if you change it to white privilege,
and just for the record,
then you don't have.
We're not white,
right? Right. We're half Mexican. But the point is, if you change the narrative, then you don't have to deal with the connotation or stigma of a previous word. You're just changing the word, but it means the same thing. So she's going to call it white privilege, but what she really means is white supremacist. And really, she knows it's all a fiction, and she's distracting people from what she doesn't want you to see and giving you the narrative of what she wants you to see. The problem is it's in conflict with what Biden said. Now, Biden has changed it, and he's gone with hers because she's really the president and not him. But his first impression was that
they were overrun.
They overran the poor Capitol Police.
Well,
okay,
you gotta forgive him. He came up with that. What, 15 minutes after, whatever.
Several days. No, but Biden's narrative was that this angry mob of vicious, savage people trying to overthrow the government overran the police and somehow broke through the barriers of this ancient stone wall building with tiny metal doors, past all the armed guards, and managed to break in and breach the Capitol's securities
without ever pulling a weapon out.
Yeah, no weapon. These are brilliant terrorists. I mean, an amazing feat. Okay, no explosions, by the way. They managed to do this without blowing anything up. Okay. Harris, though, she really knows what happened. She knows that the Capitol Police are racists, and they wanted to allow the white privileged people to enter so they could overthrow the government. Okay, so for Harris, the Capitol Police are in on it, which is why the I believe he's African American. I don't know the man, but the police chief of the Capitol Police, who's resigning, white supremacist. I mean, privileged. The point is, they're controlling the narrative. So, as citizens, we need to know why. And what are they trying to get us not to see? Okay? And here, I'm going to finish up with this, and then I'll let my brother have his final thoughts on this. Okay? And if any of you have ever seen the movie Gladiator, it's one of my favorite movies. And I know a lot of people have seen Gladiator. So I'm using a reference from Gladiator because it nails it. Okay? There's a scene where they give the Russell Crowe, Maximus, his dinner, and it's a bowl of whatever. And he looks down at it, and he's afraid to take a bite because he knows that the emperor is trying to kill him. And the gladiator sitting next to him takes his spoon and takes a bite of it to show him that it's not poison, and pretends he's dying for a second and laughs about it. And then the other gladiator, Maximus's friend, says to him very seriously, looks him in the eye, and he says, "You have a great name. They have to kill your name before they can kill you." Watch that scene if you need to, but that is why this whole thing was done. Biden cannot legitimize his presidency through the election. It is too bonkers crazy. If the Super Bowl was decided the way the election was decided, there would be riots in the streets because nobody would accept the obvious cheating of one team and the obvious bias of the referees. Okay? It would never fly. So how can we possibly legitimize his presidency by looking at the election? It's impossible. They know that Trump's name is too great for Biden to ever have a legitimacy in his presidency. They have to destroy Trump's name and destroy Trump. And it looks like right now that they've succeeded, because the Republican senators and congressmen who claimed they were going to fight for the president, because of the narrative that got to them first, okay? That magician knows he's got to control the narrative. He's got to control where you're looking. And the Democrats succeeded. They controlled where the Republicans looked and what they saw and the narrative they believe, and they're going with it. They're not challenging it. They're, I'm sorry, stupid. Okay?
So
and they've turned their backs on the president, and so the Democrats think that they have succeeded. However, the American people are really the ones who have the say here if we speak. And if we look at the evidence and we ask the questions that they can't answer, they're going to get really nervous. And you're going to see some weird behavior, but we have to ask the questions. We have to collect the evidence, and we have to say, explain this. Explain the timing. Explain why there's no burning buildings and burning cars and weeks and weeks and weeks of violence. Why was it 90 minutes of violence only in front of the cameras and nowhere else? And I'm sorry, I'm going to hand it off to my brother to wrap his thoughts.
Right, and I think that I kind of feel like pulling together the whole thing that we're saying, because we're clearly rejecting the official narrative and offering what we saw and trying to support it with everything that we can find that is true, and so we're in a bullet point. We're saying that some bad actor, having knowledge of what causes the kind of public unrest and violence, intentionally set the stage for that to happen, and so we, experiencing that whole day, know that they wanted it to happen earlier in the day. They wanted it to happen in a much bigger scale, and it didn't happen.
Blood. They wanted bloodshed. They wanted violence and bloodshed.
Yeah,
to feed their narrative.
And I know a lot of people, a lot of you out there, have been praying for a miracle to happen on January 6th, and I think we agree a miracle did happen. And that miracle was that we were given so much peace from God that we could not be drawn into that mess. And when everybody can look at the rational, data here and say, you put 300,000 people together and you have this charged emotion on a very critical day in history, and
no deterrence, no crowd control.
Of course stuff is going to happen. So stuff did happen. And then what did you see? It was dissipated. It was actually handled by the crowd. I'm not saying the police didn't help in stopping some of that, but the crowd wasn't willing to and wasn't looking for a fight on their fellow Americans. This crowd had a specific goal. At some point, the goal became to go into our house, the Capitol. And we've celebrated, as Americans, we've celebrated some civil disobedience in the past when we understood the reason for it.
They went through open doors, most of them. Some of them went through windows. Those people could have been easily arrested. Most of the people who entered that building went through open doors.
So I'm rejecting any horrible accusations on this crowd. And I'm telling you, they did something that was noble and good. They wanted nobody to be hurt. And the only death was caused by the state. And I wanted to make this point. We're not saying that a murder was planned by the state. We're not saying that the state planned to murder someone. What we are saying, though, is that the state was expecting blood, and because we did not deliver it, they drew it.
They had to manufacture it. The whole thing was manufactured. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I'm just gonna reinforce what you said. 300,000 people were there. 200 people entered the building and broke the rules. I don't know the math on that. What's that? 200,990 people did not riot.
There was nobody that rioted. Even the people that you see on the screen doing some fighting, that was not a riot. There was never any random destruction of property, random attack of people.
No.
There was none of that.
Yeah, it was the least violent.
And I will not let Ashley be described by the news as an insurrectionist. She is a brave patriot, and until I see any evidence otherwise, that's how I insist she be remembered.
Yeah, and you know that they're going to be, because they have to control the narrative. You know they're scouring her documents, her emails and stuff, looking for something they can say she was a racist.
And right now they're trying to make it...
They need to control the narrative.
They're trying to make it okay to call you extreme just because you support President Trump. And that's dangerous.
They need to control the narrative. So we need to change the narrative. We need to make sure that their narrative is questioned, challenged, and exposed for the lie that it is. And we need our conservative media to catch up. Okay, our conservative media is really behind here, and we need Republican leaders, if there's any left, to catch up, because you've been duped, and you've turned your back on the best thing that ever happened to your party.
Oh, one last thing. We don't do this, so we're not right now trying to establish a platform or a following online. We do want this message out, obviously, and we actually want to encourage anybody else that was there and saw the truth to share it. Make sure that anybody that is confused about what happened on January 6th, if you saw something other than they're talking about on the news, tell someone.
Anyone who's better at doing this than we are, please do it. We'll watch it. Okay? We'll watch it. We'll like it. We'll share it. These things need to happen. The word needs to be spread. We're just doing this because we haven't seen it yet. And there's plenty of people that are outraged. But we don't think anyone has seen what we saw and described it accurately and appropriately. Okay? I wasn't fooled by the misdirection that was pulled off against the whole country. And believe it, they pulled it off because they knew that the world was watching through cameras.
A bit of encouragement. We are very grateful that we were there.
We saw it in person.
We saw it. And I think that made it much easier for us to know that this was a big fraud. And but the bit of encouragement is I've already heard from friends. I'm already seeing a lot of speaking online from people that were not there that are just completely rejecting this mainstream narrative. So for whatever it's worth, they're not very good liars anymore. They're so well exposed.
They don't need to be good liars. They need to be bigger liars and lie first. And that's what they know. And they know that if they get the lie first, it looks more true than the truth.
But we got to recognize that when we were there for a protest and a peaceful recognition of our constitutional process and the need for our voice to be heard in that house, they were busy orchestrating an excuse to reject our voices, play this game, come back into that chamber and say their voices are now nullified because of what they did out there. So we're not going to listen to their objection anymore. In fact, we're going to reject their president and go about doing the things we want to do in our house.
Yeah, insurrectionists don't get a say in our government. So give the narrative that all of these people are insurrectionists. Thank you, Joe Biden, for calling 300,000 people insurrectionists.
And domestic terrorists.
Domestic terrorists.
What a
you just called
disgusting
these
line.
two guys here domestic terrorists, Joe Biden, and you want to be our president? That's not real honest. Okay?
Okay, I think
all right.
we could do a whole other segment on Joe
Biden. We're going to continue. No. You know what? The truth is, we're going to continue talking about this every day for a long time, probably the rest of our lives, and so are you. And that's why we're sending this out so that you can talk about the things that we talked about, and you can decide whether or not what we're saying makes any sense to you. And if it does, look for evidence, guys. Analyze these speeches. Don't get disgusted with Joe Biden and turn him off. Listen to what he says, because he's trying to direct things in this direction. And if you look the other direction, you're going to see where his hands really are.
And just remember, God delivered a miracle, and Ashley is a hero.
Big miracle.